This mob boss noticed a waitress hiding Bruises. What he did next shocked everyone. Watch until the end. Comment. Telling me what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The icy January wind cut through the streets of New York City like a blade, and Chloe Miller pulled her thin coat tighter around her body as she hurried down Madison Avenue. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the luxurious storefronts of the Upper East Side were still sleeping behind their iron gates. But she was already on her way to her second job of the day. First, she had cleaned 3 offices in Midtown since 3 in the morning. Now, she was rushing to not be late for the bakery, where she would work until 2 in the afternoon, before heading to her night shift as a waitress at the restaurant Le Bernardin. At 23, Chloe carried on her shoulders the weight of supporting not only herself, but also her mother, Carmen, and her 2 younger siblings, Leo and Sophie. The family lived in a 2-room apartment in the Bronx, where the sound of nightly sirens often competed with the rumble of the elevated train that passed every hour. Her father had disappeared when Sophie was born, leaving only debt and the empty promise that he would return when things got better. That was 8 years ago. Carmen worked as a cleaner in private homes, but the arthritis consuming her hands made every movement a silent agony. Chloe watched her mother hide the pain behind forced smiles, pretending she could carry heavy buckets when she could barely hold a coffee mug. Leo, at 17, had dropped out of school to work at a local grocery store, but the money he earned barely covered his own needs. Sophie, at 15, was the only hope of breaking the cycle. She had excellent grades and dreamed of going to medical school, a dream that depended entirely on Chloe's sacrifices. That's why she ran through the deserted streets at dawn, why she worked 18 hours a day, why she saved every penny as if it were her last. She was studying business administration at a private university, paying her tuition with her own sweat, studying in the breaks between one job and another, dreaming of the day she could give her family a better life. Le Bernardin was unlike anything Chloe knew. Located in a renovated mansion on the Upper East Side, the French restaurant catered only to New York's elite, business moguls, politicians, famous artists, people whose watches cost more than an entire house in the outer boroughs. When she got the job 2 years ago, through a recommendation from a cousin who worked in the kitchen, Chloe felt as if she had stepped through a portal into another universe. The dishes cost the equivalent of her monthly salary. The wines were imported from French regions whose names she could barely pronounce. The clients casually talked about trips to Dubai, about buying apartments like one buys shoes, about deals that moved millions as if they were pocket change. And in the midst of this world of incomprehensible luxury, Chloe served tables with the same dedication she put into everything in her life, turning every interaction into a small masterpiece of hospitality. That's how she met Gérard Dubois, the French manager who ruled the restaurant like a medieval tyrant. At 58, Gérard was a repulsive-looking man, short, fat, with greasy hair combed ridiculously to hide his baldness, and breath that mixed stale cigarettes with remnants of food. But what bothered Chloe most was not his physical appearance, but the way he looked at her, as if she were a piece of meat in a butcher shop. In the first few months, Gérard limited himself to comments about her beauty, always disguised as professional compliments. "Chloe has the perfect smile to serve our special clients," he would say during morning meetings while the other employees awkwardly looked away. Then came the accidental touches, a hand on her shoulder that lingered longer than necessary, fingers that brushed against her skin when he handed her orders, unnecessary closeness that made her feel trapped between his body and the wall. Chloe tried to keep her distance, to be professional but cold. Gérard interpreted this as a challenge. The touches became more aggressive, the comments more explicit. He started inventing mistakes she hadn't made, humiliating her in front of customers, making her redo completed tasks just to exert his power. And when she dared to question him, even respectfully, Gerard showed his true face. The first time he physically assaulted her, Chloe was alone in the storeroom, organizing dishes that had arrived from a supplier. Gerard entered without warning, closed the door, and when she tried to leave, he grabbed her arm with such force that it left purple bruises for a week. "You're going to learn to respect me, you little tramp," he whispered, his disgusting breath against her ear. "You need this job more than I need you." And that was the cruelest truth of all. Chloe desperately needed that job. The salary from Le Bernardin, combined with the generous tips from customers, represented more than half of her family's income. Without it, she couldn't pay for college, couldn't help with household expenses, couldn't keep Sophie's dream alive. Gerard knew this and used that knowledge as a weapon, turning every workday into psychological torture. The assaults became routine, a slap to the face when she took too long to take an order, a disguised punch to the ribs as she passed him in the narrow kitchen corridor, painful pinches whenever no one was looking. Gerard was careful never to injure her face too visibly. After all, she needed to be presentable for the clients. But the rest of her body became free territory for his violence. To hide the bruises and cuts, Chloe developed a painful creativity. Heavy makeup to cover bruises on her face, long-sleeved blouses, even in the suffocating New York summer heat. Elaborate explanations for any visible mark. She had slipped in the bathroom, hit her shoulder on a door, tripped on the stairs. Her colleagues pretended to believe her, silent accomplices to a violence everyone saw, but no one dared to question. After all, Gerard decided who stayed and who left, who got promotions, and who was humiliated until they quit. It was in the midst of this daily hell that Vincent Costello entered her life, although she didn't yet know the impact this encounter would have on her destiny. Vincent was the customer at table 15, a man who had lunch at the restaurant every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, always at the same time. Always alone or accompanied by people who spoke in urgent whispers. At 34, Vincent possessed the kind of presence that transformed any room. Tall, elegant, with perfectly cut black hair and green eyes that seemed to see right through people. He wore suits that cost more than a mid-range car and carried an aura of power that made even other wealthy men bow in his presence. Chloe didn't know exactly what he did. The conversations at his table were always discreet, full of references she didn't understand, but it was obvious he was someone very important in New York's business world. For 2 years, Vincent was just another customer, albeit different from most. He never treated her with disdain, never made humiliating jokes about her background, never tried to touch her inappropriately. He was polite, direct, and left generous tips that made a real difference in her tight budget. Chloe served him with the same professional efficiency she dedicated to all clients, never imagining that he was about to change her life forever. The change began subtly. Vincent started to watch her more closely, to ask questions that went beyond the menu, to show a genuine curiosity about her life that surprised Chloe. And when Gerard began to assault her more violently, Vincent was the first person to notice that something was wrong. The transformation began on an August morning when Chloe arrived at work with a cut lip and a bruise on her neck that the makeup couldn't completely hide. Gerard had lost his temper the day before because she had respectfully questioned a menu change that would confuse the customers. His response was a slap that sent her into the corner of a table, followed by a shove that made her hit her head against the wall. Vincent noticed immediately. When she leaned over to serve his coffee, he saw the purple mark on her neck, the poorly concealed cut on her lip, the way she avoided sudden movements as if every gesture caused pain. For the first time in years, something stirred inside Vincent Costello's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his parents' death. It wasn't compassion, That feeling had died along with his innocence a long time ago. It was something more primitive, more visceral. It was rage. Vincent had built his empire on the premise that absolute power was the only way to survive in a cruel world. He dominated, controlled, and eliminated obstacles without hesitation. But seeing Chloe try to maintain her dignity while hiding obvious signs of violence, he felt something he couldn't name. Perhaps it was recognition, seeing in her eyes the same steely determination he himself had developed to survive. Perhaps it was admiration for the way she kept smiling, even when she was clearly suffering. Or perhaps it was simply the fact that someone was hurting something he had, inexplicably, begun to consider his. The investigation into Gerard Dubois took 3 days and revealed a disturbing pattern. The Frenchman had a history of abuse at 3 previous restaurants, always with young, vulnerable female employees. His immigration paperwork had irregularities that should have been questioned years ago. And more importantly for Vincent's purposes, Gerard owed money to people who answered directly to him, loan sharks. The solution was elegantly simple. A 5-minute conversation in a dark alley, some compromising photos that magically appeared on Gerard's desk, and an offer he couldn't refuse. Disappear voluntarily from New York or face consequences that would make his problems with loan sharks seem minor. Gerard left on a Thursday, officially transferred to a branch upstate. The new manager, Michael Laurent, was a kind man in his 40s whom Vincent had suggested for the position. The change was immediate and palpable. The atmosphere of terror that had dominated the restaurant dissipated like smoke, and for the first time in months, Chloe could work without fear. But for Vincent, eliminating Gerard was just the first step. He had developed a growing obsession with Chloe, a compulsive need to understand what made her so different from everyone he knew. He began to prolong his lunches, to invent excuses to interact with her, to observe every detail of how she moved, spoke, reacted. Chloe, in turn, noticed the subtle change in the behavior of the customer at table 15. Vincent had always been polite but distant. Now, he asked questions about her life that went beyond professional courtesy, showed genuine interest in her opinions, and treated her like a real person instead of just an invisible employee. And his tips had become absurdly generous, $500, $800 for a meal, amounts that represented entire weeks of work at her other jobs. The first real conversation between them happened on a rainy Monday in September. The restaurant was unusually empty due to a storm that had flooded several city streets, and Vincent was the only customer present. Chloe was organizing the tables when he called her over. "Chloe," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her stop immediately. "Sit with me for a moment." She hesitated. Chatting with customers outside a professional context wasn't exactly forbidden, but it wasn't encouraged either. But there was something in Vincent's green eyes, an intensity that made it impossible to say no. "You're in school," he said when she sat down. Not a question, but a statement. "What are you studying?" "Business administration," she replied, still cautious. "At a private university downtown." "And how many jobs do you work?" The question surprised her with its specificity. "3, she admitted. "Office cleaning at night, a bakery in the morning, and here in the evening." Vincent nodded, as if this information confirmed something he already suspected. 18 hours a day. Sometimes 20. Chloe didn't know why she was being so honest with him. There was something about Vincent that made her feel safe, protected, even without understanding why. "To support your family." Again, it wasn't a question. Chloe nodded, impressed by how much he seemed to know about her life. "How many siblings?" 2. Leo is 17, Sophie is 15, my mother." She hesitated, not knowing why she was sharing such personal details with a stranger. "My mother has arthritis. She can't work like she used to." Vincent was silent for a long moment, just watching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different, softer quality. "Gerard won't bother you anymore." Chloe felt her blood run cold. "How did you—" "I notice things," Vincent said simply, "and I don't tolerate people under my protection being harmed." "Your protection." Her voice came out as a whisper. Vincent leaned forward, and she could smell his expensive cologne, could see the details of his green eyes that seemed hypnotic. "Yes, Chloe, my protection. From now on, if anyone tries to hurt you, they'll have to answer to me." There was something in the way he said it, an absolute certainty, a promise that sounded more like a threat to anyone who dared touch her. Chloe should have been scared, should have questioned what a man like Vincent could want in return for his protection. But all she felt was a deep, inexplicable relief, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "Why?" she asked, her voice still trembling. Vincent was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words carried a weight she couldn't fully comprehend. "Because you remind me of something I thought I'd lost forever," he said. "You remind me that there's still beauty in the world, even amidst all this rot." Chloe felt her heart race. There was something dangerously seductive in the way Vincent spoke, in the intensity of his attention, in the feeling of being truly seen by someone for the first time in her life. But there was also something frightening in how he took control of the situation, in the way he talked about protection, as if she were already his property. "I don't need protection," she said, trying to sound firmer than she felt. "I can take care of myself." Vincent smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had ever seen from him. It completely transformed his face, revealing a beauty that went beyond physical appearance, a vulnerability he kept carefully hidden. "I know you can," he said. "That's what makes you so special. You're strong enough to survive on your own, but you shouldn't have to." The words hit Chloe like a punch to the chest. Her whole life had been about surviving on her own, about being strong when no one else could be, about carrying responsibilities that should have been shared. The idea that someone might want to share that burden was both tempting and terrifying. "I don't know you," she whispered. "I don't know anything about you." "My name is Vincent Costello," he said, and for the first time he offered information about himself. "I'm 34, I work in investments, and I've just discovered it's possible to feel something other than emptiness." The raw honesty of the confession left Chloe speechless. There was something broken in his voice, a deep loneliness that echoed her own experience of carrying burdens too heavy for one person. The months that followed were a delicate dance between closeness and distance, between the growing desire to know each other better and the fear of what that proximity might mean. Vincent began to appear at the restaurant more frequently, not just for his business meetings, but also at unusual times, as if he needed Chloe's presence to function normally. She, in turn, found herself eagerly awaiting these encounters. Vincent had a gift for making her forget, for a few precious moments, the weight of the responsibilities she carried. When they talked, Chloe felt free to be just herself, not the responsible daughter, not the dedicated student, not the exemplary employee, just Chloe, with her dreams, fears, and desires she rarely dared to admit. Vincent began to help her in subtle but impactful ways. When he learned she was worried about her university tuition, a scholarship for students with good academic performance mysteriously appeared. When Carmen needed wrist surgery for her arthritis, a specialist offered his services for free, claiming to be part of a social program no one could identify. When Leo lost his job at the grocery store, a position opened up at a logistics company with a salary 3 times higher. Chloe knew Vincent was behind these coincidences, but he denied any involvement with an innocence that convinced no one. It was his way of taking care of her without making her feel indebted or diminished. Each gesture was calculated to seem like luck or fate, preserving her dignity while alleviating her hardships. But as they grew closer, Chloe began to realize there were layers to Vincent that she didn't understand. Phone conversations in languages she didn't recognize, meetings with intimidating-looking men, references to businesses that sounded too vague to be innocent. And there were moments when he thought she wasn't looking, that his expression would turn cold, calculating, almost cruel. The truth about Vincent Costello came to her unexpectedly on a December night when she was working late organizing the restaurant's inventory. She was alone when she heard voices coming from the private meeting room, the same one where Vincent conducted his most secretive meetings. The door was ajar, and although she knew she shouldn't, curiosity overcame caution. "The problem with the assemblyman is solved," said a voice she recognized as one of Vincent's frequent companions. "The photos were delivered, and he's already withdrawn the bill. He won't be bothering our ports anymore. And the judge," Vincent's voice was cold, professional, "also convinced. His daughter got into the American university she wanted so badly. He got the message. Excellent. And that journalist who was investigating the City Hall bids? He had a car accident last week. Nothing serious, just enough to make him rethink his priorities." Chloe felt her blood run cold. She was hearing about blackmail, corruption, intimidation, possibly attempted murder. And at the center of it all was Vincent, the man for whom she had begun to develop feelings she didn't dare to name. "Good work," Vincent said, and there was a cold satisfaction in his voice she had never heard before. "Now, let's talk about the expansion into Newark. I need 3 council members on our side before next month's vote." Chloe backed away silently, her heart beating so hard she was sure everyone in the building could hear it. For weeks, she had wondered about Vincent's mysterious businesses, creating innocent theories about real estate investments or international trade. She had never imagined he was the kind of man who controlled politicians with blackmail and silenced journalists with violence. In the following days, she tried to act normally, but Vincent immediately noticed that something had changed. Chloe avoided his gaze, answered his questions with monosyllables, and found excuses not to linger at his table. Her coldness affected him in a way he hadn't expected, awakening an anxiety he hadn't felt in years. The confrontation was inevitable. Vincent appeared at the restaurant on a Thursday night, after closing, when Chloe was alone finishing her cleanup. She tried to leave when she saw him enter, but he blocked her path to the door. "What happened?" he asked, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. "Why are you avoiding me?" Chloe tried to get past him, but Vincent gently held her arm, forcing her to look him in the eyes. "Please," he said, and the vulnerability in his voice made her stop. "Talk to me." "I heard you," she whispered, and she saw the exact moment Vincent understood what she meant. The mask of vulnerability fell, revealing the cold, calculating man she had glimpsed in the hidden conversations. "Heard what?" he asked, but his voice was already different, controlled. "About the assemblyman, the judge, the journalist." Each word came out like an accusation. "I know who you really are, Vincent." There was a long moment of silence. Vincent studied her with his green eyes, which now seemed dangerous instead of seductive. Chloe had the terrifying feeling that he was deciding what to do with her, as if she were just another problem to be solved. "And who am I?" he finally asked. "You're a criminal," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You blackmail people, you buy politicians, you hurt anyone who gets in your way." Vincent nodded slowly, as if she had just confirmed something he already knew. "Yes," he said simply. "I am all of that, and more." The brutal honesty hit her like a slap. Chloe had expected denials, explanations, attempts to downplay the truth. She didn't expect a direct, remorseless confession. Have you killed people? She asked, not knowing where the courage to ask that question came from. Vincent hesitated for just a second before answering. Not directly, but I've given orders that resulted in deaths. Yes. Chloe felt her legs weaken. She was standing before a murderer, a man who decided who lived and who died, with the same coldness with which he chose wine for dinner. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because you asked," Vincent said, "and because I won't lie to you. Ever." "Are you threatening me?" The question seemed to hurt him physically. Vincent recoiled, as if she had slapped him. "Never," he said, and for the first time since the conversation began, his voice carried real emotion. "I would rather die than hurt you. You are the only pure thing left in my life." "Pure," Chloe laughed, but it was a bitter, humorless sound. "You think I'm pure? I grew up in the Bronx, Vincent. I know what violence is, what desperation is, but it didn't make me. It didn't turn me into you." "No," he agreed. "It made you strong. It made me a monster." There was a deep sadness in his admission, a self-awareness that went beyond self-justification. Vincent knew exactly what he was, and he wore that knowledge like a branding iron. "Why me?" Chloe asked. "Why do you care about me?" Vincent was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of years of loneliness. "Because when I look at you, I remember what it's like to be human," he said. "Because you make me want to be different, to be better. Because for the first time in 15 years, I wake up in the morning and feel something other than emptiness." The words hit Chloe in the chest like bullets. There was a raw sincerity in his confession, a need that mirrored her own loneliness, but there was also danger, the dark seduction of getting involved with someone who could destroy her without a second thought. "That doesn't change anything," she said, trying to sound firmer than she felt. "You're still a criminal. You still hurt innocent people." "Yes," Vincent agreed, "I am, and I do. But I can change. For you, I can try to be different. People like you don't change. Maybe not, but I'm willing to try if you give me a chance." Chloe's response didn't come in words, but in tears she tried to hide by turning her face. Vincent saw every one of them, and he felt something inside him break for good. It wasn't just desire or obsession, it was true love, the kind that transforms and redeems, the kind he thought he was incapable of feeling. "Go away," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Please, just go away." Vincent nodded, respecting her request, even though it was killing him inside. But before he left, he placed a card on the table, along with a golden key. "If you change your mind," he said, "this is the address to my apartment. The key is yours, it always will be. And Chloe—" He paused at the door, without turning to look at her. "I will never stop trying to be worthy of you." In the weeks that followed, Vincent did something no one in New York would believe if they knew. He began to dismantle his empire. Not completely, not overnight, but systematically, choosing to step away from the dirtiest businesses, passing territories to others, liquidating operations that depended on violence or intimidation. It was a painful and dangerous process. Other criminals saw it as weakness, trying to take by force what Vincent was voluntarily abandoning. There was war in the streets, shootouts, deaths. But Vincent resisted the temptation to solve everything with extreme violence, finding more elegant solutions, buying his way out instead of eliminating problems. Chloe learned about it through news reports, comments from customers at the restaurant, rumors that spread through the city. There was a gang war happening, but it was a strange one. A war where Vincent Costello was clearly retreating rather than advancing, ceding territory instead of conquering it. She tried not to care, tried to convince herself that Vincent's changes had nothing to do with her. But when Carmen casually mentioned that the doctor who had operated on her hand was offering free physical therapy to complete the treatment, when Leo was promoted again at his job, when Sophie won a scholarship to a preparatory course for medical school, Chloe knew that Vincent was still taking care of her family, even after she had rejected any involvement with him. The turning point came on a February night, as Chloe was leaving the restaurant and was approached by three men who were clearly not common muggers. They knew her name, knew about her family, knew about Vincent. "You're going to give a message to your little boyfriend," said the leader, a thin man with scars on his face. "Tell him Marco Velez doesn't accept the crumbs he's offering for the Southside territory. Either he gets back to business properly, or we're going to show him he's not the only one who knows how to hurt important people." To emphasize the threat, one of them showed her photos of Carmen leaving home, of Leo walking to work, of Sophie at the school gates. The message was clear. Vincent might be trying to redeem himself, but it was putting Chloe's family in danger. That night, for the first time since the revelation about who Vincent really was, Chloe took the golden key and went to the address on the card. The apartment was a luxurious penthouse in Soho, but when Vincent opened the door, she barely noticed the expensive decor or the spectacular city view. All she saw was the relief and hope that spread across his face when he saw her. "They threatened my family," she said without preamble, storming into the apartment. "Because of you. Because of this attempt of yours to change that's just causing a war." Vincent closed his eyes as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "I know," he said. "I'm already handling it." "Handling it how? By going back to being the monster you were before?" "No," Vincent said, and there was a steely determination in his voice. "By finishing this once and for all." He went to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offering one to her. Chloe refused, but sat on the sofa, watching him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Marco Velez is a problem I should have dealt with years ago," Vincent said. "He always wanted my territory, always tested my limits. As long as I was completely ruthless, he stayed in line. Now that I'm trying to change, he sees an opportunity." "So you're going to kill him?" It wasn't a question, but Vincent shook his head. "No, I'm going to do something much worse for a man like him. I'm going to destroy him completely without spilling a drop of blood. I'm going to ruin his reputation, expose his crimes, make his own allies turn against him. And then I'm going to hand him over to the police with enough evidence to keep him locked up for the rest of his life. And after that, I'm out of the game for good. I'll sell what's left of my legitimate businesses, take my clean money, and start over somewhere else." Chloe watched him, trying to decide if she believed him. "Why would you do that?" she finally asked. Vincent knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Because you taught me there's a difference between being strong and being cruel. Because you showed me it's possible to protect the people we love without destroying everything around us. Because I would rather be an ordinary man who deserves you than a king who reigns alone." The tears Chloe had held back for weeks finally began to fall. There was sincerity in Vincent's voice, a vulnerability that went beyond any manipulation. He was offering to abandon everything he had built, all the power he had accumulated, for a chance to be worthy of her love. "And what if I say no?" she whispered. "What if I say it's too late, that you've hurt too many people to be forgiven?" Vincent smiled, but it was a sad smile full of acceptance. "Then I'll do it anyway, because you taught me that some things are right regardless of the reward. And protecting you, making sure your family is safe, is the right thing to do." Chloe pulled her hands from his and touched his face, seeing for the first time not the powerful criminal, but the broken man who had hidden behind a mask of coldness for so long. "I can't promise I'll be able to forget," she said. "I can't promise I won't be scared sometimes, or that I won't question if you've really changed." "I know," Vincent said, "and that's why I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I have, not with words, but with actions." The kiss that followed was unlike anything Chloe had ever experienced. It wasn't just passion or desire. It was a promise, redemption, the beginning of something new and frightening and beautiful. It was the meeting of two wounded souls who had found in each other the possibility of healing. 6 months later, Marco Velez was arrested in an operation that resulted in the complete dismantling of his organization. The evidence against him mysteriously appeared on the desks of investigative journalists and prosecutors, presented so meticulously that its authenticity was impossible to question. The man who had threatened Chloe's family received a 40-year prison sentence. Vincent kept his promise. He sold his legitimate businesses for a fortune that, while smaller than his former empire, was more than enough for a comfortable life. He moved with Chloe to a coastal town in the south, where no one knew his past, where he could start over. They opened a restaurant together, a simple but elegant place that quickly became known for its excellent food and warm service. Vincent discovered he had a talent for running an honest business, and Chloe flourished as a manager and hostess, her genuine smile attracting customers from neighboring towns. Carmen moved to live near them, finally free from constant pain after proper treatment for her arthritis. Leo finished his studies and got a job at a tech company, achieving dreams that once seemed impossible. Sophie was accepted into medical school at a top university, with a scholarship that covered not only tuition, but also housing and living expenses. On the night of their first official anniversary, as they walked along the beach in front of their restaurant, Vincent stopped and knelt in the sand. The ring he offered was simple, beautiful, not at all ostentatious, exactly how she liked it. "I know I don't deserve you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know my past will always be a shadow between us, but I promise I will spend every day of the rest of my life being worthy of the love you've given me. I promise I will protect you and your family, that I will honor you, that I will love you more with each passing day." Chloe looked at the man kneeling in the sand, the man who had abandoned an empire for her, who had chosen redemption over power, who had proven that even the hardest of hearts can learn to truly love. "Yes," she said, and her voice carried over the waves like a song. "Yes, I will." The kiss that sealed their engagement was witnessed by the stars and the sea, and for the first time in their lives, both Vincent and Chloe felt they were exactly where they belonged, in each other's arms, building a future based on true love and second chances. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.